Well, after you had already let me know there'd be some questions, I look back and it's actually 50 years since I started my practicum where I was doing therapy in my practicum. It's actually been 50 years now.
50 years. Oh,
Yes.
are you celebrating somehow?
No, I didn't really think about it until you asked me the question.
Uh-huh. Oh, so was it a long time or short one? The 50 years. How do you look back at it?
Oh, well, no, it went pretty quick.
Uh-huh.
It went pretty quick, and then I continued to get training all the way through. So I continued to change in different ways in my therapy. Or I would add. I didn't change a lot, but I would add things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And from the 50 years, which part is bonded with Adlerians somehow?
So the first three years was more Gestalt therapy, and I'd studied at Esalen Institute in California for independent studies. But then when I went to the University of West Virginia, I wanted to study with Sonstegard, who was a real close with Dreikers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to study with him. And so I went to University of West Virginia to study with him. And then he left. And but a person that lived with him for 3 years that he taught me. And so that's when I began to learn Adlerian. And I worked in I did parent study groups and worked in a family education center. So that's how I actually started, was with parenting.
Uh-huh. Okay. And these days, do you like use parts of the both approaches, like the Gestalt and the Adlerian?
I use primarily Adlerian, but what's interesting is when it comes to looking at body language and listening to tones of voices and tempo, the Gestalt's still there. And so the Gestalt therapy is still there. It just helps me pay very close attention to body language.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So what do you like about the Adlerian approach?
Well, gee whiz. Of course, I started with parenting, so I really found it to be something I was amazed with, that I saw it work all the time. And so when my first job was working with addictions, and so we did parent study groups with parents of teenagers who were getting in trouble, so it was more prevention. But then working with people that were addicted, adults, I did a lot more with early recollections, and I began to discover, doing early recollections with addicted people, that there were patterns that seemed to always be there. So after a while, I began to do research.
Okay, okay. And you said that you were working with the people who are dealing with addictions.
Yes.
Is this the major part of your work nowadays, or what is it?
It is. I've worked with people with couples counseling. I worked in a psych unit, but I've always been involved with addictions in some way. And so that was a large part of what I did. Even though I did all types of therapy with people with different kinds of problems, it was always, the umbrella was addictions.
Okay, okay. So my question is, how does it fit together, the Adlerian approach and the addictions?
Well, extremely well, because with Adler always talked about all behavior has a purpose, and then working with addictions, I began to notice that I saw it as all behavior had a positive purpose, and so I usually look for the positive intent behind behaviors. So I look for the positive intent in the person using substances before they got addicted. When they first started using a substance of any kind, what was the experience for them? And whatever the experience was would tell me their positive intent. So some people would, use and it relaxed them. Other people would use and be more outspoken. And so I would look for whatever was the positive thing that happened the first time they ever used.
Okay. So it's called the positive intention therapy. That's kind of your way of working with this theme.
Well, my therapy is actually a little bit different. Like my workbook's called Sobriety Enhancement. If people ask, I tell them that I'm really doing Adlerian psychology. I just have that little bit of a slight difference where, but when it looks at other recollections, then or doing a lifestyle, then I'm using normal Adlerian. I hate to say the word techniques. I use normal Adlerian therapy. But then one little thing that I do different is I look for the positive intent.
Okay.
And one of my books is perceptual adjustment therapy. Because if you think about our perceptions in Adlerian is pretty much how we perceive things is pretty much the whole ball of wax. And it combines Gestalt therapy, Adlerian psychology, and neurolinguistic programming. And so I combine those three in the way I do therapy. And that was my first book. My second book is pretty much all based on Adlerian psychology. And it's Soar Like an Eagle is the name of the book. And since in German, Adler meant eagle, that was the reason for the book's title. So the metaphor would be to soar like Adler, to move to that level.
Okay. I love the metaphor of the eagle. Like when you're doing the psychotherapy, you need to get the eagle high.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And this positive intention therapy is something we are going to bring to our summer school.
I will. And yet, if most everybody there is Adlerian psychologist, then I'll frame it more in Adlerian psychology. But it'll also be tied together. So when in my workbook Sobriety Enhancement, I look for the positive intents behind using and help people understand what most of us don't understand, the positive reason we do things. And so once a person begins to have that awareness, then they can find healthy ways to accomplish the same thing. If a person, like I said, a person, when they say drank alcohol, they're relaxed, then I work with them to come up with healthy ways that they can relax other than using substances, because that's a key to their sobriety.
Yeah. How you speak about it sounds like it's pretty easy, but I would say that it's not. And mostly for me, it's to look the right way to find the positive intention, which is like the great part of it.
And for me, and in a way, it is very easy. In another way, it's rather difficult. So it actually, once you understand it, it's really easy to find the positive intent and begin to figure out how to structure it. But with Adlerian psychology, though, Adler was such a genius. He was able to see so many things. Like I mentioned, I studied neurolinguistics. Well, Adler was doing neurolinguistics before there was such a thing. Adler was holistic. Well, Gestalt therapy is holistic. And so everything that I do ties right back into Adlerian psychology.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah, like the Gestalt therapy and the going back to Adler. Okay, thank you very much. And I have another question for you.
Okay.
What metaphor would you use for your own work with clients?
Yes, I had to think about that for a while. And actually what I do is years ago I was with a woman taught by American Indians, the Lakota Sioux, and I went through the process of using the medicine wheel with her. And so what's interesting is the medicine wheel, where I started, because it had more to do with me, was in the medicine wheel, the bear is the one that looks inward and also has to develop inner courage. And of course, with Adlerian psychology, courage is huge. And so that fits right into Adlerian psychology. And then with the and as you move around the medicine wheel, the north would be the buffalo, and the buffalo is very grounded and connected. And just like in Adlerian psychology, you look at how people are connected socially, look at social interest. And so for me, that grounded connectedness fits right into Adlerian psychology that way, because I'm wanting to work with clients to become more connected with the earth, but also connected with society. And then in the east would be the eagle. And of course, the eagle can see so well and see at great distances. And also the eagle, if you think about it, the eagle is the closest to the Almighty. So the thing there's a spiritual connection, and also you can see great distances. And when you look at early recollections in Adlerian psychology, one of the things that I do is the early recollection will actually tell you how the person's going to behave tomorrow and in a month and in a year, because it's the pattern in which a person walks through life. And so in that way, to me, the eagle ties into it, looking at a person seeing the process in which they walk through the world. And then the last would be the mouse. That would be the south. And the mouse looks at things very closely. And is somewhat timid. And so that's the part, by looking at things very close, is people become very aware of themselves. And the mouse is, because it looks so closely, is always involved in awareness. And so one of my tasks as a therapist is to help people become more and more aware of themselves. So basically, I help people develop inner courage, to feel grounded and have social interest, and to see their future by understanding themselves, and then also to have awareness about themselves and the world about them. So,
yeah, it's a great one. I've already heard about it from you, and I wonder if you use it with the clients, like to explain it to them. And
no, I do not. It would be very easy to do with clients, but usually I walk the path with them, but I won't explain the metaphor. What I usually use is their early recollection as a metaphor. And with all clients, I use early memories. And so I use these early memories as their metaphor. And so I use the metaphor they give me. Rather than to give them a metaphor, I use the one they give me. And in therapy, even after we've been in therapy for a period of time, we'll go back to that memory. We'll go back to that metaphor and see how how they're doing with that now, and the awareness, like the mouse, the awareness that they've gotten from it, and the wisdom, like the eagle, that they have now, so that they have choices in life, so they can choose to do things the same way, or they can begin to choose to do things differently.
Yeah, it makes sense to work with the metaphors client says and brings. Yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And after all those years you are working with clients, I would like to ask you, when you meet a new client, what are the important things you are focusing on?
Well, like I said, I'm always looking at how they see things and how they feel things and how they hear things, because all of us process information differently. Some of us are more visual, some are more feeling, and some of us more auditory. We hear things. So I'm always looking at how a person processes their information, so that when I talk to them, I can use their way of processing information. So if somebody's more a feeling person, then I'll talk in feeling terms. If somebody's more visual, then just like they would use, I would use more visual terms, like I see what you're talking about. Or if it was more auditory, I might say, I hear what you're talking about. And so, but I would want to connect with the way they process information, so that they would actually understand what I'm saying. And then also, I always want to ask what they want in each session. Because people will come in, and this has been what I've seen over the years. People come in and they tell me what they don't want. They don't want to fight with their wife, or they don't want to fight with their husband, or they don't want to drink anymore. They'll tell me what they don't want. And so my first step is beginning to understand what they do want. And sometimes it takes a while, because that's not how people think. People think about what they don't want. But once you begin to think about what you do want, it becomes much easier to arrive at what you want. And so if I talk about this in a workshop, one of the things I'll probably mention is a woman I saw years ago, and I said, what is it you want out of our session? And she said, I want to quit fighting with my husband. I said, okay, that's what you don't want. You don't want to fight with your husband. So what is it you do want? And she was puzzled. And after about 5 minutes, she finally said, I would like to have a nice conversation with my husband, whether we agree or disagree. And I said, okay, now that we can work for. And so the first thing in therapy that I'm doing is helping a person actually look at what they want, how they want their life to move, instead of what they don't want.
Yeah. And maybe you are first to ask them after a long time, or maybe ever, about what they really want.
Yeah.
And
what's interesting, I'll ask clients that every session. So even if I've seen somebody for 2 months, when they come to see me the next session, I'll say, what is it you want today? And so 2 things. One, I'm always training them to think that way. But the other thing is it's important for me to know if I want to be a good therapist, because as therapists, as we have done this for more and more years, we lose our skill. We're not as good unless we go back to the client every time and find out what they're wanting. And so I always do that. And so my clients know when they come and they sit down that I'm going to say, well, what is it you want today? So on the way to see me, they're already thinking about, okay, I know Jim's going to ask me what I want. What is it I want out of the session? And so they're already working before they even get there.
Yeah. This sometimes happens to me when I'm starting to realize how the client is working, and and I'm starting to see the path we could go. So I prepare something, and I think most of the times it goes very, very badly because it's my idea and my goal and not theirs. So
and that's where we can all make our mistakes.
Yeah,
all of us. That's therapists in general. That's what we have to guard for. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's pretty easy to ask every session this question at the beginning and try to connect more with the client's thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And also I would like to ask you about this long term, like 50 years working with people, especially and doing the psychotherapy, and not to burn out. How do you do that?
Well, I burned out really. Doing Gestalt therapy, it's very intense, and I would get very involved with people's emotions and their body language. And after a while, through neurolinguistic programming, I learned that one of the things I was doing was mirroring my clients. And so I would take on physically. So when clients say, "Oh, you don't know what I'm feeling," yes, I did. We all can if we mirror the person. But the trouble is, if you spend your day working with depressed people and you continue to physiologically mirror them and not even intentionally, but accidentally copy them, by the end of the day, you're going to be depressed because you've been acting depressed all day. And so when I went to neurolinguistics, I found out the first couple of days I was there what I was doing wrong, and that I was mirroring clients, which made my clients thought, well, Jim really understands me, which was great. However, to continue to do it for a full hour was a mistake for me. And so what I've learned to do is other ways to be connected with my client without taking on all their stress and feelings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
In this country, years ago in the mountains, there were people, and they may be in Europe, I don't know, there were people called sin eaters. And so somebody died, they would put them on a table, and everybody would come to the house, and they would put food on them, and they would have someone come, and they would pay them. They would eat the food, which was to eat the person's sins.
Yeah, I have heard about it.
Okay, and so what I realized by always mirroring clients, that you're taking on their problem. And so it's important to connect and to really get in tune with the client. However, we don't need to stay physically like them for very long. Once we connect and get in rapport, then we can begin to move them away from their negative feelings. They can begin to mirror us, and we can move them to a healthier place.
Mm-hmm.
Is that confusing or?
No, it's making sense, but it sounds I don't know, like level 100 to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to make the client mirror myself and to I don't know, like foresee for him the good behavior or the good way to look at the world. Yeah.